Are you here? Well, of course you are, in every meaning of the word. We hope you are. Welcome to episode number 1086 of the Paul Leslie Hour. This time we're joined by Alan Govenar, a versatile storyteller who brings real-life narratives to life through many mediums. As a writer, documentary filmmaker, photographer, and playwright, he masterfully crafts compelling stories. You might pass him on the street unaware of the creative worlds he's imagining and bringing to reality. Real quick, I'd like to encourage you to be a friend and helper of the Paul Leslie Hour. Simply visit www.thepaulleslie.com/support. And in advance, we thank you for tuning in and for going that extra mile. No amount is too small. And, well, no amount is, you know. And with that, what do we say? Let's get this episode started.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the Paul Leslie Hour. It is my pleasure today to welcome Alan Govenar. He is a multifaceted artist, a writer, photographer, filmmaker in the world of documentaries, a folklorist. Alan, what has always been the purpose of the art you create in all of these different mediums?
Discovery, wanting to know more, wanting to see more, wanting to experience more. And my experience that I have had since I was a child have impacted me in many different ways. And I see the world in different media. And depending on the subject matter, that's the direction I go. So as a child, I made little picture books. I had a build your own darkroom kit. I made little 1/2-inch negatives and printed them. And as I got older, I started writing. And I started writing poetry, short stories. I started my first novel when I was 18. And that novel was just published May 2025. So there's been creatively continuity, though it's structured in one sense, it's totally free form in other ways.
You contain multitudes. You know, when I was looking through the press release about you, I just thought, wow, you could go in so many different angles. There's so many different things that you touch in some way, visually, words, different subjects, from the blues to tattoos. Is it hard sometimes to organize your thoughts?
No, not especially. I rarely, if ever, have writer's block. So I'm constantly making things. For me, the deepest joy is in making, creating, trying to make sense of the world around me. In that sense, I'm also a very grateful person that I have this time on this earth. I think that's been even heightened more in recent years when I have had more health challenges. But I've always felt an urgency to do as much as I can.
Do you have a favorite medium?
Not that I would identify as such. I think poetry, which was my first literary foray, continues to be very important in my life. And I write poems just about every day that I come back to and that have been published in artist books and other kinds of collections, mainly artist books. When I was younger, I published in little poetry magazines. But for me, my poems are not complicated. They're the joy of words.
Do you have a writing process or a writing ritual that you use?
My ritual is, I think, become more pronounced since I had major pancreatic surgery 6.5 years ago. The recovery part of that was walking. I've always loved walking. So I walk a lot. When I was discharged from the hospital, I was walking 5 miles around those hospital corridors. And so I walk 5 to 6 miles a day. So I start my day, my My wife and I have an apartment that's about 10 minutes away from where we work, and I listen to the same piece of music every morning. And it's a guitar piece, Spanish Dances, performed by Andres Segovia. And it's a piece that I'm never tired of. It's called Asturias. I get to my office, I put down my things, I go for a walk, I come back, have a coffee, and sit down and start working. And what happens during the course of the day for me is sometimes I'm focused on I've published over 40 books. A big part of my life is writing them and making them. And they all go through many, many drafts that span years. And in the case of my novel, Come Round Right, obviously it's spanned more than 5 decades. At the end of the day, I have another piece of music that I listen to on my way home, and it's John Coltrane's ballads, and that takes me home.
This is so interesting. Do you find a link between this physical act of walking and then the mental output of then turning into this creative field of writing?
Well, when I'm walking, I make a lot of photographs. I make a lot of little movies. And sometimes I'm just walking and listening, or talking on my phone. It's the mobile office sometimes. But my most preferred way is for the world just opens up to me. I walk at times of day when the light is interesting, or, I walk when it's rainy sometimes. It energizes what I do, but it's a way of visually responding to different situations. And with the advancement of iPhone technologies, I started making movies with movie film, and now I have a 4K camera on my iPhone. So I've gotten into making these, that build on what Lumiere was doing and Thomas Edison at the beginning of movie making. And so I make a lot of little actuality movies. And in my show that's currently on view, that opens September 20th at the Center for Photography at Woodstock in Kingston, there's one of these little actuality videos that I did. It's called Silent Disco. It's kind of a crazy thing with a bunch of people doing their thing in silence on a pier in New York City. And it's just something I stumbled on. But I like making little movies. So while I have long-time cinematographers who have worked with me. I have a new movie that's premiering at Cinema Village on November 14th called Quiet Voices in a Noisy World, the struggle for change in Jasper, Texas. So part of that's shot with my iPhone, part of it's shot with different, cinephotographers using the latest technologies. So I like the mix of media.
So this Woodstock event, how can people see what you were talking about?
Well, the Center for Photography Woodstock, which is in Kingston, it's about an hour and a half outside New York City, north on the Hudson. It's a wonderful drive from New York City, but it's also a wonderful train ride because the train just goes up the Hudson to Rhinecliff, which isn't far away.
What you were saying about the iPhone, I'm in awe. I think a lot of people just become kind of, they just become like, oh yeah, it's an iPhone. I've never stopped being astonished at what it could do.
I'm with you. I mean, the movie feature, because I shoot with my iPhone, I make 24 frames per second 4K video, which is much higher quality than the photographs. The photographs are good. And sometimes if the lighting condition is just perfect. I mean, I've done some iPhone photos that I can make very large. However, generally speaking, you can't zoom in much. I wrote a foreword to a book by Bart Weiss that was published in England this year called Smartphone Cinema. And Bart's really into every gizmo and gadget related to this. And he's a former film professor. I wrote the foreword to this book. My approach is much more basic.
Would you say that there is a guiding mission to your documentary films?
My interest in documentary filmmaking has been to draw attention to marginalized and overlooked people, misunderstood people. My first film, which we'll be showing there's a retrospective of some of my short films and longer films at Cinema Village, November 14th to 20th. But my first film, Stoney Knows How, that was made with Les Blank and Pacho Lane, was an outgrowth of a book that I started. My first published nonfiction book I started when I was 23. And it was about a man who was a hunchback dwarf tattoo artist in a wheelchair. And I did a college paper about him. It became a journal article, and then it was eventually published as a book 8 years later. And in the midst of making that, I decided to apply for an NEA grant to make a movie about him. And I wasn't a filmmaker, but I went through a couple of film crews, landed with someone who became my mentor in filmmaking, Les Blank. And that film was premiered in New York at Film Forum in 1981, the same year my book was published. And that film, well, by then I didn't own anything in it. I mean, I had to give up ownership to finish it. I did finally buy back interest in this movie 10 years later. But at that time, the film did get a lot of acclaim, and Les helped shepherd it into the world. And Vincent Canby reviewed it in the New York Times, and it was shown in 1982 as part of the new Directors series. And so that film was really an book or an inside look at the sideshow, what a lot of people call the freak show. Stoney, who was the subject of this film book, agreed to tell me his life story. There were no books about people who, from an inside perspective. There was Elephant Man, which for Stoney's point of view was fictionalized. It was about exploitation. Stoney agreed to let me document his life on the condition that I write his obituary and not simply talk about him as a tattoo artist, but as an actor on the outdoor stage, much more dignity. He was a man of great, in my mind, aplomb. He was a grandfather figure in my life who I went to see every week for about 7 years. And he became the subject of this movie. He was a big influence on the subjects that I chose to later document. So as part of this retrospective and premiere, I'm focusing on difficult issues. The film Quiet Voices is about these volunteers in Jasper, Texas, who have suffered through generations of virulent racial violence and have been amazingly resilient and hardworking. There are people in their 70s and 80s who volunteer to reclaim their own history. They do it quietly. They put up historic markers. They've built 3 little museums. They've built a memorial. It's a model of how hometown America can take ownership of the history that they want to tell about themselves. Another earlier film of mine, my first documentary feature that's going to be showing, is called The Devil's Swing. And I made that in the mid-1990s, and it's about the Texas-Mexico border. It's a story it takes its name from a legend that the devil would swing between the Sierra de la Santa Cruz in Texas and the Chinati Mountains. This is Sierra de la Santa Cruz in Mexico to the Chinati Mountains in Texas. And the devil's swing broke and landed the devil's ball landed in Ojinaga, Mexico. But it's this region which has great apocryphal kind of importance. It's a low water crossing point. And at the time I was making this movie, it was the last vestiges of the living border culture, where you could pay a Mexican man $1 and he would row you across the river to Mexico. Now, of course, you needed to know someone on the other side because there were just little villages of 50 or 60 people strung out along this area. It is known as La Junta de los Rios, and it's the confluence of the Rio Conchos and the Rio Grande. It's an oasis in the middle of the desert. And I documented this area for 5 years. And sadly, the conclusion of the film was the beginning of the militarization of the border. This 18-year-old boy, Ezekiel Hernandez, was killed by a Marine in a ghillie suit. Ezekiel was herding his goats. He had a World War I carbine rifle and was gunned down by a Marine thinking he was a drug smuggler. It's tragedy upon tragedy. When they went to Ezekiel's room, and he was an honor student, he was a straight A student. And in his room, above his little desk, was a poster about how he wanted to join the Marines.
Mm.
So that's another film that'll be showing. Another one that I did is called the Beat Hotel, which is about the legendary Beat Hotel in Paris, where the American beats became famous in the United States, where William Burroughs wrote Naked Lunch, or parts of it.
Mm.
And then there's another film that I did in New York. It's a Chinese language film called Master Chi and the Monkey King, about a Chinese opera performer in New York City who's built a company during that period. This is probably 15 years ago, of Chinese immigrants performing a style of opera that's waning in China. So my subject matter has definitely been in film is issue oriented.
Mm-hmm.
Because in addition, large part of my public life, and I've talked about my personal work, but the work that I've done through documentary arts has been cultural advocacy. I've worked with this organization, WIPO in Geneva, helping to protect the world intellectual property rights of non-Western cultures. And my wife, artist Khalida Doolin, and I founded what's called the Texas African American Photography Archive. There's an exhibition also at the Center for Photography at Woodstock called Kinship and Community. There are 2 books associated with these exhibitions. So there's lots to look at. But the last collection that I got was from the community of Jasper. So I like my work personally takes many years sometimes to come to fruition. My associations with the people I document, this is not news. This is not television approach.
Right.
I've maintained contact with people in Jasper who are the subject of one of these exhibitions. They're subject of a book of mine. I've been in association with them since 1996, and we are to rescue the work of a Black photographer there for the archive. And we are now that we have stabilized this collection, which had been almost ruined in a storm, we're giving back to Jasper high-res images of their community. So there's a lot of different layers to what I do.
Yeah, there certainly is. You know, I noticed the Blind Lemon Jefferson connection. That caught my eye, and it gave me the sense that you're a digger. You know, you're looking beneath the surface.
Yeah. I like studying things that are hard to study.
Makes it challenging.
Well, and also in the end, I think it makes it more rewarding in a certain way, because I've seen this happen, particularly, tattooing. When I was I was one of the early people writing about tattooing as an art form. In the 1970s, tattooing was still social deviance. One of the many things I've written about tattoo, I talk about how, tattooing has gone from being one of the most forbidden art forms in the Western world to being the most common, which is astounding. But that's also true in what I've done in music. Partly the draw of Blind Lemon, finding out about Blind Lemon for me related to my blues research, but it also related to my theatrical life, because I've written 3 off-Broadway musicals, and I've got a new musical theater piece that just had its world premiere in April, May. So Blind Lemon was a mystery. He was a seminal figure. Akin Babatunde and I created a show that had 2 productions off Broadway and also had its world premiere in France, called Blind Lemon Blues. And it was basically what we could put together through Blind Lemon's music, because not much is known about his personal life, and to show the way in which he influenced the growth of American popular music. We did Kevin Yarborough and Elisa Peoples and Akin they did arrangements of Blind Lemon songs, and everything from traditional blues to hip hop and rap. And so it took on a different dimension. And so that show led to another one called Lonesome Blues, my current musical that had a wonderful world premiere in April, May. Stopping at the Savoy, the story of Norma Miller. And this was a children's book of mine that's become a musical. I have a wonderful, young, brilliant African-American collaborator, Phaedra Michelle Scott. The director of this show is Edgar Godino. And this, we're hoping it aspires to become a Broadway show if Broadway shows are possible anymore. It's not, the recent press is not encouraging.
Yeah. Well, I have the same common thing to do that you do, and that is to walk while listening to things. And this is pretty wild. I thought you would like this. Today, walking along, the Bob Dylan version of See That My Grave Is Kept Clean popped up as I was walking, and what I thought in my head was Alan G. meant to be.
Well, that's interesting because it ties back to where I started talking about my novel, Come Round Right, which is a paean to the end of the 1960s. My novel is set in the fictional past of 1970 and the fictional present of 1971. It's a hitchhiking novel. It juxtaposes past and present that eventually converge, but the present part of it is propelled. You learn in the first paragraph that the person who's telling you this story is on a quest, of course, to find himself. But the way he decides that only way he can do this is crazy idea. He's in his college dorm. He sees a record LP jacket. He flips it over. It's Bob Dylan's Nashville Skyline. And he decides that that's his mecca point. He has to hitchhike to see the Nashville skyline. And that's going to change his life, which it does forever.
Huh. How about that? Now, not just limited to documentary films necessarily. I think people document things in a lot of different ways. You're kind of making me think of Studs Terkel and the way he documented things on the radio. But who would you say, in terms of any style of documentary work, has influenced you the most?
I think it's some of these early films, these Edison films, the Lumiere films. They're not complicated, but they're smart and they're creative. They're very clear about what they're about. And those have had a great influence on me. So I was less influenced by, I have studied documentary filmmaking. I think that for me, a film that really influenced me was Night and Fog. Let me tell you about this movie. In terms of art documentaries, which for me, the most powerful documentaries are not just literal reportage. They create this tension. They use the art of cinema to convey something more. And so it's, for me, Documentary Arts, just as an aside, has launched an online magazine called truthinphotography.org. And it's about a lot of the issues that we're discussing here. But this film by Alan Rene was made in 1956. And it's basically a film that the narrator takes you on a personal journey through the Holocaust. And you see, it's called Night and Fog because it was in Night and Fog that the Nazis took away the Jews to the death camps. And this is about what's left in the death camps, the piles of skulls, the wheelbarrows full of bodies. And it was very controversial when it was made because it implicated certain French collaborators with the Nazis. And so for me, that film, which it is one of the most powerful documentaries I've ever seen. And it is important to me because it not only brings together art culture, but it's advocacy. It's like, we need to know this. In a way, this film, it couldn't be more relevant in today's world in these efforts to eradicate history. The coddling of the American mind. Doesn't feel good, don't do it. That's what we're living through. And finally, hopefully, the resistance can mount. And so my film, that's going to be showing is very powerful because it's a film that contains images and descriptions of racial violence. And one of the people who were participating in the talkback, Donji Benjamin from Kingston, which is where the show's happening, is an African-American man who's been very much at the forefront of resisting erasure. So for me, these subjects are very important.
I just know that there's someone out there who's watching this or listening to this. Maybe it's a young person. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's an older person who has always dreamed of making a documentary. They feel that it's in them. What would you say to somebody who has that dream? They haven't done it, but they really feel like I could make a documentary. What would you say to them?
Well, I'm very interested in what you just said, because there's a film of mine, one of my documentary features that I made over a period of 4 years. It's called Looking for Home. And Looking for Home was a movie I made when I was having issues with my pancreas, and I was going to have major surgery. And I just started talking to people on the streets in New York City about what they thought of home. And then I had been doing some work with a facility that served homeless and at-risk people. And I got to know this one couple who lived in, their home was in a little hut that they had made in the spillway. They're kind of a viaduct kind of thing. And as the film evolved, I went through my surgery, came out of that. And then, I got my clean bill of health in March of 2020, and it was lockdown. And the last filming that I did, because I was talking to people anywhere about what they thought, buses, subways, and there was a family from Argentina at Grand Central Station. And this young woman came up to me, asked me what I was doing. And I told her, and she said, well, I want to be in your movie. And I said, great. And she was the only one, I think, who really spoke English. And she was 20 years old. And she was very vibrant about what she thought about home. A week later, the world's in lockdown. And she had asked me to email her the footage. And she was in lockdown, and she started doing selfie videos of her life in lockdown, her family, her father. I mean, it was just great, and it was, she was very much helping me to make this movie, and it took a different course. So I started inviting people from different places around the world to send me selfie videos of what they were doing during the lockdown and their whole idea of home. There's one from Nairobi. There's one from London. There's, one from Paris. And so it was a participatory kind of documentary, and it's kind of a meditation on home as it turns, you might want to watch the film, but my documentaries for me are, while they're informative, I also want them to be poetic. They make juxtapositions that are not normally made. The visual and sound elements do not necessarily illustrate the point that's being made. They allude to the point. So they go in different directions. It's like this new film of mine, Quiet Voices. Partly I'm using recordings that were made by John Lomax in this part of Texas in Jasper, 1940. And then there's other photographs. So it takes you in some unexpected directions that I think give you a more, holistic and global sense of what was going on.
Well, what you said just there, it kind of made me think that the average person nowadays, like even a high school student, has more tools to make a film or to take photos than perhaps people did decades ago.
Well, and that's, yeah. I mean, if you think about the number of photographs and potential for movies, once again, truthandphotography.org. It's a mix of everything from photography made by high school students and Magnum Photos. Documentary Arts developed this in association with Magnum Photos, Aperture, and the International Center of Photography. It's a free online forum. And so we get submissions from all over the world. And so it's really inviting people to explore issues of truth and image making in an open forum and publishing work that others may consider controversial. We've published 3 interviews with the Ukrainian photographer Maxim Dunyuk, who did the cover and a story for Time, Der Spiegel. But we publish photographs of atrocities in the Ukraine that obviously would never be published in the mainstream media. So it challenges people to think about what they're seeing and to assess it. And today, with AI, once again, it's exploded. What do we believe? DocumentaryArts.org.
DocumentaryArts.
And we keep pretty much current with what we're doing. So where are you based?
I am in South Carolina at the moment.
Oh, I've never worked in South Carolina, though I did do a stage show in Atlanta for the National Black Arts Festival on Black Cowboys.
Which venue?
At the National Black Arts Festival in Atlanta.
Okay. I got you. Now, my last question here. You've had the chance to see the world differently from a very different lens in some cases. What is the best thing about being you and having the perspective, and I mean perspective in the literal sense, that you have?
Well, I'm a very family-oriented person, and I have 2 wonderful children. I have a wife of 36 years, and that means a lot to me. And a lot of my approach in my work, I mean, my kids growing up came along frequently on what I was doing. I mean, my son and daughter both have little cameos in different movies at different ages. That for me is going home. And the warmth and glow of family life. So that's very important to me. It's a very important part of what I do.
I like your answer. In many respects, you remind me of a great writer named Natalie Goldberg.
Thank you, Natalie. I don't know her name. Natalie might be like, I used to joke with friends that my work was available in lesser known places everywhere.
That's a great tagline. Well, I have so enjoyed talking to you.
Me too.
You are to be commended for your incredible prolificness and interesting body of work.
Well, thank you. Well, I hope some of your listeners will check out the books, the movies, and whatever else they can find. So thank you very much. I've enjoyed the conversation too. Thank you.
Thank you.
We thank you and appreciate you dropping in for the Paul Leslie Hour today. You can help the Paul Leslie Hour in our mission to provide independent media content like this by visiting www.thepaulleslie.com/support. We truly thank you. This is your announcer speaking. Performance of The Entertainer intro song and Corina Corina outro song, courtesy of John Primorano. Well, that's it for today. So until next time, be safe and be good.